Greece, 5th century BC. Over the course of 3 decades, led by one man, a city and its people rise to greatness. This is Athens, the birthplace of democracy. But it is Pericles' city.
Pericles decided that the best way to leave an indelible mark on posterity was to completely alter the skyline and appearance of the center of his city, Athens.
Pericles builds impregnable fortifications, the first Senate house, a complex network of pipes to supply his people with fresh water. He builds the most powerful navy in the ancient world, and he builds temples. One, the Parthenon, will be hailed by many as the most perfect building ever completed.
I think he did have a vision for what Athens should be, and seemed to follow that vision for most of his life.
After 2,500 years, we can show this vision again, recreate this lost world as Pericles saw it, the greatest city on earth. In the 5th century BC, from the hundreds of competing states that make up ancient Greece, one man leads his city to greatness. The city is Athens, and Pericles is not a king or prince, but an elected man. His power comes from the people and from his own single-minded vision.
The story goes that when Pericles' mother was 8 months pregnant with him, she knew that she was going to have an extraordinary son who was destined for greatness because she had a dream that she gave birth to a lion. And for the ancient Greeks, the lion was always a symbol of leadership.
To be a successful politician and statesman in Greece, he needed to be a military leader, and he needed to be an effective speaker in the assembly. And he was clearly both of those. Pericles not only contributed to Athens becoming a leading power, I think he was the main creator of that power.
Pericles wants to send out a message to the world that Athens is supreme, the capital of a new empire. He will deliver this message by building. What he intends is the most costly and ambitious construction campaign undertaken in the Western world. He needs to fund it. In what some will see as an act of blatant theft, he raids the Greek treasury. Money, which should have been used to defend all the city-states in the region, is diverted to the glorification of his own city. And work begins on the Parthenon. Built to honor the goddess Athena, it will become the most imitated building in history, an inspiration to engineers and architects. It will take 8 years to build, cost the equivalent of $100 million, and use a staggering 20,000 tons of the finest marble.
The Parthenon is arguably the most influential building in world history. You cannot go into any city in North America or Europe, or indeed most of the world, without finding a 19th century bank facade, parliamentary building facade, or law court building that isn't in some way influenced by the Parthenon.
The Parthenon is a very special building because of the visual impact it has on you. When you go up there, it's first of all huge. Solid marble, there's not a straight line in it, so that it has a lightness and a sense of movement. When you stand on the Acropolis and look at it, it seems almost afloat.
The image of the Parthenon is familiar to us, but 25 centuries of war, weather, and history have reduced this building to a shadow of what it once was. Engineer Ed McCann and architect Manolis Koris have set themselves the task of deciphering exactly how it came to be built, what it looked like during Athens' golden age. Pericles' men cut marble for the Parthenon from the nearby mountain of Penteli. The team restoring the temple today get their marble from the very same place. What seems laborious, even with the aid of modern technology, would have taken months in Pericles' time. First, the marble was chiseled by hand from the parent rock. It was examined for faults, and then the business of transportation began.
It was a 10-mile journey, and they bought 20,000 tons of marble blocks with just teams of oxen and rollers, this incredibly long journey all the way up the steep Acropolis to get it there. This is an astonishing feat. It would be an astonishing feat today with proper cars and so on.
The most difficult part of the journey was the last part, getting the marble up a 302-foot slope. Ed McCann has discovered the ingenious technique that the masons used for lifting.
They had a very cunning system for getting the rocks up to the top. And what they did was they set up, they had a cart on one side with the rock on it, and up the top on the other side they have another cart full of stone with a big rope going round and over a giant pulley wheel. And then they set up the donkeys and the people all pulling down. And so they pull down and lift the rock up, and then at the top they're able to unload it, and then they bring the horses up here, they put a rock on that side and they bring it back up and down like that. So it's a counterbalance system.
The size of the challenge becomes even more impressive when Ed and Manolis calculate the weight of the marble. The individual blocks were vast.
So they had 8 cranes dotted around the Parthenon, and these were timber cranes, and they lifted these pieces up into the construction. And the biggest piece was 13 tons, so about
the biggest 8 pieces weighing 13 tons each.
The cranes were immensely strong, capable of hoisting a 13-ton column. They were also very simple in design. 2 wooden beams were connected by an iron bracket, and ropes were passed through a pulley block at one end. 200 men were employed on the site itself, but around the city, thousands more labored to support them. Masons, molders, founders, rope makers, transporters.
Manolis, are these the original pick holes?
Exactly. Second stage after bringing the stone from the quarry. It is one of the preliminary stages.
But the last time someone put their finger in there might have been 2,500 years ago.
Exactly.
With a pick.
Once it was in place, the most skilled masons carved the marble. Ed McCann wants to understand how they worked by trying it for himself.
The key principle that underlies working the stone is working from doing rough cuts with the stone through to gradually getting to finer and finer stone cuts. And that's reflected in the tools that they use. So that the tool that they used for rough cutting was this double pick. It's difficult to lift and it's difficult to aim. I'm reliably informed that if you were any good with this, I could move 200 kilos, that's about twice as much as I weigh, in an hour's work with one of these. Now, as you got into the stone and you needed to get finer and finer, you needed to use ever smaller tools. And I can put them exactly onto the bit of stone I want to hit, to the nearest millimetre. It's much, much easier to use, and I can't really go too far wrong. But of course, I don't get very much off with this. It would take me 2 weeks chiseling away, basically reducing the marble to dust before I'd move 200 kilograms.
Once the columns and drums had been finished, they needed to be fitted together.
So this is where the original stones were put together, and these were iron clamps.
Exactly. The clamp is missing, but you see the bed of the original construction.
And this would have been underneath, so you wouldn't have seen it.
Always.
So it was underneath the bottom of the
exactly.
column.
Hidden by the next course, yes.
I see. Okay.
Today, damage from pollution means that the Parthenon needs extensive restoration. As Ed McCann hunts for clues about how the stones were originally put together all those centuries ago, he gets exclusive access to the work that's being done now.
This is the modern restoration work that is going on. And although it's different to what they did in Periclean times, there are some similarities. I mean, first of all, the The column drums themselves are the same, and they're lifted up, in this case, by a great big iron and steel crane. In those days, it would have been a timber one. And you can see in the middle there a little metal spigot sticking up. Nowadays, it's made out of titanium, but in Periclean times, that would have been wood. And that's what helps you to center this thing. So when you lower it in with a crane, there's a little hole, and you line them up, and then you know you're exactly centered up.
Each wall, each column is evidence of extraordinary skill. The stones are perfectly positioned and seamlessly joined.
You see one of the best preserved joints in the Parthenon, because this column was never destroyed by any event like bombardment or earthquake.
In these joints, you couldn't get a piece of paper in there, could you?
The outer structure required 46 of these 13-ton columns. The result was a building of unparalleled grandeur. Today, it is impressive, but as it stood in Pericles' time, it would have been breathtaking. Not just the exterior, but the interior, which has long since vanished. Our investigators will now concentrate on that interior and try to reveal it as its builders first saw it. Because the Parthenon once held the most spectacular statues ever made. What Pericles builds on the Acropolis is, in its time, revolutionary. It is at the center of his program to reform, remodel his city. This program is startlingly ambitious. It is also hugely successful. Pericles will change his world and help define ours.
Pericles managed to get his dream to come true, which was to build all those beautiful temples on the Acropolis and to have his name on our lips 2,500 years later.
And it appears that in his lifetime, these buildings were even more impressive, even more beautiful. Ancient writers describe the Parthenon's interior with awe. What they talk about is no longer here. In 1687, the Venetian army bombarded the city of Athens. The center of the temple was destroyed by a huge explosion. Now Ed McCann and Manolis Koris hunt among the ruins to decipher what clues are left. They want to understand what the Parthenon looked like when it was first built.
This is where a Venetian cannibal smashed into the column, bang, and the lines of stress fly out and a big chunk of the marble falls off. And they're all over here. We see one there, one there. I've noticed that you've got some Greek vandals. Because that's graffiti, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes. One of 230 graffitis in the Parthenon, many of them of historical value, pertaining to people thanking God for being saved in the sea after voyage back to Athens, and so on.
A Greek sailor would have gone out in his ship, and if he'd had a successful voyage, he would have come back to the Parthenon, climbed up here, and scribbled something on the wall saying, "Thank you very much, God."
Exactly, yes.
Fantastic.
Amongst the graffiti and the bomb damage, they spot other markings, traces of pigment that suggest this whole structure once looked radically different. The conventional picture of a Greek temple is one of clean white stone, but it appears that the Parthenon was once covered in color.
So the Parthenon was actually painted when it was
Yes, it
new.
was painted. It was a principle in ancient architecture to cover the buildings with paint, even in marble.
We can now recreate what it looked like. Gleaming white columns were topped with gables of blue, red, and gold. In fact, no other Greek temple was as intricately colored as this one. In addition to the painting, there were stunning sculptures. There were 92 statues. One frieze carved into the marble was almost 520 feet long. And the sculptures that adorned the gables were colossal.
I think the Parthenon is remarkable because If you look at the sculptures, and we can these days see them from behind and see that they're beautifully sculpted in the round, yet once up in the building, they could never be seen. It's hard to explain that, except perhaps the pride of the artists, the sense that they were doing this in honor of the gods and perhaps in honor of the city. Pride of workmanship.
Pericles intends that anyone entering the building will be intimidated. This is not just a place of worship. It houses the state treasury and also the ultimate symbol of the city, an enormous statue of the patron goddess, Athena. Engineer Ed McCann has been trying to find the place where the statue, long since destroyed, once stood.
Manolis is a bit embarrassed to tell me where the statue was because it's right underneath that rather horrible crane. It was where Athena used to stand in all her glory. Will you put Athena back as part of the restoration?
It's impossible because the whole thing was destroyed, completely destroyed during the fire in the 3rd century AD.
Records suggest that the statue was 30 feet tall. It was clad in gold and ivory. And because it was inside the building, it could only be seen from close quarters. Any onlooker would feel dwarfed.
This statue was virtually unprecedented. Pericles had it put on a plinth that was 5 foot tall, so that when you went in, all you could see was her feet, and then you gradually lifted your gaze up and up and up and up. 40 more feet until you finally came to her beautiful face, her helmet with these horses springing out of it towards the gods. The statue of Athena in Athens completely altered the history of temple statuary in the ancient world, and therefore probably of Christian statuary as well.
And the design of the temple's exterior has proved still more influential. Throughout the 2,500 years since it was built, engineers all over the world tried to copy the Parthenon, but they never bettered it. Ed McCann unlocks its secrets.
One of the more famous stories about the Parthenon is how, although it's a very rectangular building when you look at it, actually there aren't any straight lines in it at all, and that the people who built it all with gentle curves going upwards to counterbalance an optical effect, that when you look at straight lines from distance, they don't appear to be straight, and so everything's curved. And to show that, what we've done here is we've taken one of the main steps here on the Parthenon, we've put a string going from corner to corner, and here I am in the middle of the Parthenon, and we can see that there's maybe 4 or 5 inches here of sag relative to the top of the step. What that means is that the step is 4 inches higher here than it is on the corners, and this happens all over the Parthenon.
It is now possible to bring together decades of research and, using the latest graphic modeling techniques, rebuild the Parthenon. 8 columns at the front, 8 at the back, a row of 15 on either side. Traveling through the temple, you'd pass through a porch, into the 100-foot-long sanctuary of Athena, into the treasury at the back, and out through another porch made with 6 columns.
The Romans regarded the miracles of the Acropolis as the models for many of their buildings, and of course they then affected enormously the sort of buildings that went up during the European Renaissance. So even if it's via Rome, the Parthenon's influence always lives on in architecture.
This one building alone would have been enough to guarantee Pericles' place in history. But he will do more. He is bringing a radical, fundamental change to Athens. A new set of buildings will transform the whole city and its people. Pericles will build democracy. High on the Acropolis, throughout Pericles' time in government, the Parthenon stands as testament to Athens' status. It is a superpower.
Athens showed her dominance over the rest of the Greek world mainly through, I think, Pericles' building program.
But his plans aren't just about showing off to the wider world. Pericles intends to reshape the lives of ordinary Athenians. The focus of his building work shifts from the religious sanctuaries to the city below. Like modern-day Athens, it is a busy center of trade. At its heart is the Agora.
The Agora was extremely important. It's a marketplace, it's a political center, it's a social center. It's basically the middle of town in all respects.
Today, the Agora lies in ruins. It has in the past been attacked by barbarian invaders and built on by private homeowners. It is abandoned. But it is possible to recreate what it looked like in Pericles' time, when these 30 acres were the center of the most advanced civilization on Earth. John Camp is a world authority on the building of the Agora. He spent more than 3 decades trying to piece together what it looked like. Within this one plot were busy streets, a collection of temples, a marketplace, and the first ever Senate House.
The Agora in Periclean times would have been quite impressive. It would have been lined with stoas, which are big, long, colonnaded buildings in which you could take shelter from the sun or from the rain, depending on the weather. And it will have been full of people.
Yet another stunning temple was built here, very different from the Parthenon. Called the Hephaestion, it was dedicated to the craftsmen who made Pericles' vision a reality. By making this gesture, Pericles was acknowledging the root of his power. It lay in the backing he received from his people.
It's one of the best preserved temples in antiquity, so it's a little hard to see how it goes together. When you come down here, you can see pieces of its virtual twin, which was set up down in the lower square. And from this, you can see that the building is made pretty much all of marble. No mortar was used. The individual pieces were held together with iron clamps, such as the one you see here, and iron dowels. And you can still see the piece of iron and a little bit of the lead used to hold it in place, along with the pry hole used to get the next big block in place. This here is a step block, and everything above here in that direction would have been the second step, so all these marks would have been covered.
The Hephaestion stood on the edge of the Agora, but at its center stood the council chamber. To build it, workers leveled ground, created artificial terraces, and built into the rock. The building techniques used were tried and tested, but what happened inside the building was revolutionary. This building was the birthplace of democracy.
These walls here are all that remain of the old council chamber, built in about 500 BC. It was a very simple building with mud brick walls, a columnar facade to the south, and a bunch of wooden seats for the councilors to sit on.
A rectangular antechamber led to a large main hall. At its center, a timber roof was supported by 5 columns.
500 Athenians would be allotted every year, not elected, just picked out of a hat, to serve as the senators.
The form of democracy they used was very simple. The council would present the people with issues for discussion, litigation, taxation, or whether to go to war. Then the actual decisions were made by the people. They cast their votes by dropping a pebble into a terracotta pot. The council chamber can be compared to the U.S. Senate, but instead of allowing career politicians to dominate, it was expected that at some point in his life, every Athenian citizen would serve.
Most democracies today are representative democracies. Athens was a direct democracy. We can compare it as a working system of government to something like a New England town meeting, where everybody in the town goes to the meeting and the decisions are made by everyone.
Pericles' Athenians also developed a way of preventing any one individual from gaining too much power.
Ostracism is something we don't use anymore. It was kind of a reverse election where the Athenians had the opportunity once a year to vote somebody out of office. And the way they did it was by writing the name of the man they thought was a threat to the democracy on a piece of pottery. And the Greek word for that is an ostracon. So it was essentially being exiled for 10 years by vote of little bits of pottery.
One day, a politician might be enormously popular with the people. The next, his assets could be frozen, and he might be banished from the country for 10 years. It's striking to note that is a punishment that Pericles never faced, despite dominating politics in Athens for more than 3 decades. His power came from the support of the people. And the humble homes of private individuals lay nearby, right alongside the mighty buildings and temples of the state.
We're in the remains of a fairly typical Athenian house. This wall here going back in that direction there, that area is the open courtyard. They're very simple, they're very modest.
The walls of these houses were made out of mud brick or field stones reinforced with wood lined with clay. Once finished, the walls were painted in white, black, yellow, or red. The floors were made out of simple packed clay with perhaps a mosaic pattern. Houses were built to face inwards toward a central courtyard, and each citizen was expected to connect his own home to the city's water supply. Hundreds of years before the great building projects of Rome, Pericles' Athenians developed and built a highly advanced sewage and water system. John Camp found what was left of it beneath these ruins.
Clean water is essential for the well-being of the city, of course, and both Pericles and other statesmen concerned themselves a lot with making sure the Athenians had enough. You see here a group of pipelines that have been excavated, many of them used to bring good fresh water into the city, many others used to carry the wastewater away. And literally hundreds of meters have been found crisscrossing the agora.
Sections were short, 3 to 4 feet long, because they were made on a potter's wheel. Around 2 inches thick, they were made with a special lip at one end to ensure a watertight fit. When a length of pipe had been laid, the engineers would test for leaks by pouring through water stained with ash. Traveling in shallow trenches beneath the agora, these pipes carried water from numerous wells and mountain springs. Pulling all these elements together, the temples, the houses, the marketplaces, the civic buildings, and this highly innovative sanitation system, it's plain to see that Athens was a model city. Under Pericles, it thrived. The challenge lay in maintaining this success. As Athens grew in wealth and power, it drew the jealousy of its neighbors. Pericles had to prepare for the day when the city would come under attack. The city of Athens undergoes a transformation. With their backing, Pericles leads his people for more than 3 decades.
Every year for over 30 years, he was re-elected head of the Board of Generals. Every year he was elected like that. He never, ever, ever failed to get that position.
As Athens booms, this military side of Pericles' authority becomes more and more vital. Tension mounts with Sparta, the only serious rival to the power that Athens holds in Greece. Pericles realizes that he needs to prepare his city for the possibility that war will come. Athens' existing defenses guard a large wedge of land, bounded by a pair of long walls and 2 miles of shore. It becomes clear that should Spartans attack, this is simply too great a line to defend. The Athenian forces would be overstretched and vulnerable. Though Athens is 5 miles inland, Pericles knows that the sea is where its power lies. Greece is mountainous. Overland travel is difficult. Most of the city's trade happens with the island states of the Aegean. So Pericles focuses attention on protecting the route to the port at Piraeus. He builds a 3rd wall running straight to the harbor. This wall creates a defensible corridor. Though narrow, it means that whatever happens, Athens is connected to the sea. Even by modern standards, this would be a major public building project. Like the construction of a freeway, the building of the wall forces its way through private houses and farms. It crosses rivers. It divides communities and separates people from their land. But to Pericles, the disruption is a price worth paying. Athens has to be ready to fight. Today, nothing remains of Pericles' wall, but this fortification at Agostina is very similar. It provides investigators with the best clues to what Athens' long walls would have looked like.
The wall that he built would have been of smaller stones than this, I imagine, for 4 meters or so, 12 feet, and then above that, mud brick for another, say, 3 or 4 meters.
2 external stone faces were filled with rubble. Above the foundation lay low stone called socle. On top of that, there was mud brick. The walls were about 16 feet wide and 30 feet high. They were 8.5 miles long. It was Pericles' intention that they would be unbreachable. The key to that lay in the way they were manned. Weapons expert Mike Lodes has been investigating the way Pericles policed these defenses. He would rely on a rapid reaction force of mounted troops to travel up and down their length.
The Athenians recruited 300 cavalry. Now, that's a fascinating direct link between Pericles' long walls and cavalry. This was the start of Greek cavalry.
Mounted troops were a major innovation in ancient Greek warfare.
Cavalry can patrol along the walls. Cavalry can be shot out from postern gates at a moment's notice to go to the moment of trouble. And cavalry can patrol the countryside to protect that agricultural infrastructure.
Postern gates were located at regular intervals along the walls. High towers and ramparts offered another level of security.
The Athenian police and watchmen were recruited from Scythian archers. The Scythians were this people from north of the Black Sea. And they had these wonderful, strong, powerful, recurve bows made of horn and sinew. Got a range of about 250, 300 yards. So anybody trying to lay any sort of siege work out there, these archers are going to be picking them off, and they would stand no chance.
It wasn't just arrows that attackers had to fear. Pericles also stationed men armed with slingshots along the walls. They were effectively the snipers of their day.
And their slingshot was cast in lead, so it has weight. It's aerodynamically shaped like a bullet. This would kill a man. And in fact, this is a copy of one that's in the British Museum, an original Greek slingshot, and it says the words Dexa, which means take that. It's a wonderful millennia-old bit of soldier's wit. And you simply place the sling in the basket and hurl it.
Built before the development of siege warfare, these walls were never breached in Pericles' time. No army had the technical or logistical skill to bring them down. It meant that Pericles could confidently try to seize the advantage. He could take his country to war.
The war began because there were two main cities in Greece, Athens and Sparta. Both were ambitious to be the leaders of the Greek world, and it was a case of two big kids on the block, and there was only room for one. So war was inevitable.
The golden age of Athens was about to come to a dramatic end. Pericles plans to gamble everything he has built, everything his people have worked for, on the strength of his mighty navy. We will uncover the lost world of the Greek warship. (431 BC). As Pericles predicts, the forces of Sparta invade Athenian territory, and Pericles responds in a way that shocks his own people. Having strengthened the city's fortifications, he now puts all his faith in them. He orders the people of the countryside to abandon their homes and take refuge behind the walls of Athens. Many see it as cowardice. And so the Athenians watch as 60,000 Spartans rampage and destroy. Pericles' reasoning is that the Spartan army is too strong. To take them on land would be to lose. Instead, he will carry the battle to the sea, passing troops down the narrow, protected corridor that links Athens to the harbor at Piraeus. He will attack Sparta using a fleet of highly advanced, deadly warships, his triremes.
Certainly we can say that Athens had the best navy in the Mediterranean in the 5th century BC. One reason for this was because Athens' income from empire allowed her to pay her crews to train longer and harder than anybody else's crews.
No archaeologist has ever found remains of a trireme, but our investigators have pieced together the story of what must have been an awesome feat of marine and military engineering. The tri in trireme refers to the key innovation that set these ships apart. 3 banks of oars, one on top of another, gave it massive power.
Earlier oared warships had rowers at 2 different levels. By adding a 3rd level of rowers, you got half as much power again within the same length of hull. So it made the ships faster and more maneuverable.
From ancient drawings of the triremes, the designer's intention is clear. They wanted to use this extra power to brutal effect. Boris Rankov believes that the front of each ship was reinforced to make a ram.
The ram was essentially a projection at the bow of a ship ensheathed in bronze with cutting edges on, and this was used to ram into other ships and knock holes in their hulls.
So the trireme was basically a guided missile. The idea was that it would penetrate the hull of an enemy ship, cause maximum damage, and then move off. Success was dependent on the skill of the person at the helm. To work effectively, the ram had to impact at a speed of 10 knots. And if it was too late or too early, the trireme's vulnerable sides would be exposed. Boris Rankov believes that the ships must have been built from an extremely light wood.
Flat out, they could probably manage something like between 9 and 10 knots. A ship of 50 tons with 200 men on board, traveling at nearly 10 knots, is really quite impressive.
Only by investigating the remains of ancient boathouses can experts estimate the size of triremes. They may have been as much as 120 feet long. Boris's reconstructions make it clear that their deployment required a massive amount of muscle. 170 men in 3 files, each man wielding an oar up to 13 feet long. Pericles' fleet was vast. Accounts from the beginning of the war with Sparta suggest that he had 300 ships at his disposal, with around 200 sailors per ship That's a navy of 60,000 men. And there were other people on board each ship. Each one also transported soldiers called hoplites. Disembarking at strategic locations deep in Spartan territory, they would have quickly done damage to their enemy, then sailed away. Weapons expert Mike Lodes reveals the kind of tactic the hoplites used in battle.
You would have vast phalanxes of hoplites, infantry, armed with a spear and a shield, would charge each other, meeting with an explosive energy, shoving and pushing and jabbing and stabbing their spears deep into the enemy ranks. It was a war of attrition. Imagine that behind Richard there are 600 hoplites, 8 to 12 rows deep. Now the first 2 or 3 ranks are going to be able to reach with their spears into the enemy lines. But behind that, the men are muscle and weight.
With these highly skilled troops and the power of the triremes behind them, it appears that Pericles has the means to snatch a quick victory over the Spartans. But that victory doesn't come. The Spartans invade and attack the walls of Athens 5 times in 10 years. Each time they are forced to pull back, but keep returning. Gradually, the Athenians are worn down. And then Pericles' people come under attack in a way that they could never have foreseen, because their ships, their greatest strength, return from foreign ports carrying disease. Thousands of people are crowded behind the city walls, and in these cramped conditions, an unnamed plague wreaks havoc. A quarter of the population dies.
The Athenians, for the first time in 50 years, lost all hope. The number of them that died seems to have been extraordinary. The physical suffering that went on, people didn't die for a week or 10 days. Bits of their bodies rotted and fell off. They coughed their lungs up. They were covered in disgusting rashes. And there was probably an absolutely appalling smell of putrefying corpses on top of the smell of the foul water which had happened because so many people were confined within the long walls, and the sewage.
Pericles did not escape. The man who had built the Parthenon, nursed democracy through its infancy, fortified his city, and led it for decades with vision and daring, was as vulnerable as anyone else. He died. No one has ever been able to put a name to the disease which caused so much destruction. But recent findings suggest that all these people were probably killed by typhoid.
Typhoid can be a very nasty disease. It can cause rising fever, you can become unconscious, delirious, you can get perforation of the bowel, blood uncontrollably coming out of your intestines.
When Pericles died in the plague, it left a huge hole in Athenian political life. And this left a power vacuum that all kinds of probably less able people strove to fill.
Athens was physically and psychologically beaten. Finally, in 404 BC, after vicious internal fighting and a series of military disasters, the city was forced to surrender to the Spartans. Though the defenses that Pericles built had never been overcome, his city was humbled by its bitterest enemy. It had taken 30 years to build. Within one generation, it was brought low by war and disease. And yet this doesn't detract from what Pericles achieved. The city he built set a blueprint for Western civilization. Its influence can still be felt. Its legacy does not diminish. In the immediate aftermath of the crucifixion, the followers of Jesus numbered barely 100. They were a persecuted underground cult on the verge of being wiped out. Yet within a few decades, this cult had thousands of followers throughout the Roman Empire. It spread through mighty cities like Ephesus, where previously pagan worshippers had built the Temple of Artemis, one of the wonders of the ancient world. It swept away the old beliefs. It traveled as far as the deserts of Turkey to Cappadocia, where a mysterious people carved underground cities and extraordinary churches from volcanic rock. And in the beginning, the message of Christianity was carried on the roads that Rome had built for its soldiers by one man, a preacher named Paul. In his life, he walked 20,000 miles, bringing change and upheaval wherever he went. Now, using the latest research in computer graphic imaging, a team of experts will try to reveal the world that he knew, the places that he traveled to and transformed. This is the lost world of St. Paul and the first Christians. 36 AD, in the city of Jerusalem, Jewish leaders are doing everything in their power to crush a dangerous new cult, the cult of Christ. Just 3 years after Jesus' crucifixion, only a handful of his followers survives. If they can all be killed, their religion will die too. A conservative Jewish teacher presides over this persecution. His name is Saul, and he personally supervises the execution by stoning of one of the Christian leaders. Yet in time, this man will become Jesus' greatest messenger. More than half of the New Testament is made up from his writings. Many argue that without him, there would be no Christianity. Saul became Paul, and he shaped our world. Now, our investigators want to uncover the world that shaped him. The story starts in southwest Turkey, in Paul's hometown of Tarsus. It's still a busy town today, but historian Mark Wilson wants to find traces of the city that Paul knew and which helped mold an extraordinary character.
It lies in a very fertile plain with much agriculture in the area. Textile production is prevalent in the area as well. So as you look around Tarsus today, it's a very prosperous and booming city.
It's become a site of Christian pilgrimage.
This is the area in Tarsus where Paul lived, and all pilgrims to the city visit this area.
It's widely believed that this well was in use 2,000 years ago and that St. Paul drank its water.
This would have been a water source for his family. And because of this, many people believe this is holy water in the well.
There's little in Paul's own writings about his hometown, but other sources reveal a striking and significant fact. Tarsus once stood on the shores of the Mediterranean. The sea has since receded several miles, but this was once a major port.
In the first century, it was a very bustling city on a major crossroads and also a noted university town, the Athens of the East.
And just 1 block from Paul's well, new evidence is emerging that gives us new insight into life here at that time. Recent building works were halted when workers found ancient ruins buried right beneath the town's center. Examining the find, the archaeologists realized that they were looking at a row of stores, an ancient mall dating back to the 1st century, Paul's time. The walls of this excavation pit are marked with layer on layer of artifacts. Successive generations lived here. But it's the discovery of a street at the bottom of the pit that provides the biggest clue. It's a paved road. And it's dead straight. Only one civilization built like this: the Romans. Local archaeologist Nadir Durgun points out other evidence of Roman occupation.
You can see the rain gutters each side of the road.
Oh, amazing.
Yes,
Look at those.
the white stones. And it's visible, there are a lot of wheel traces on the road, wheel tracks. You know, carriages, coaches use the road.
As a port, Tarsus was wealthy. That made it an attractive target for the Romans, and they occupied it in the decades before Paul's birth. This Roman presence would have a major influence on the way he would be brought up.
This street is amazing because the young Paul probably played and walked along this street when he was a boy growing up in this city.
Archaeological investigations enable us to recreate what ancient Tarsus would have looked like. This was a busy commercial center. Paul would have come into contact with people of different nationalities, different faiths.
Perhaps Paul came down here and bought some groceries or traded in produce. His family, of course, were leather workers, tent makers, and they would have worked down in this central area of the city as well.
Tradition has it that his family were craftsmen and traders. They certainly had the means to give him a privileged education. He's raised a strict Jew and called by the Jewish name of Saul. But he's also a Roman citizen, something which will prove advantageous throughout his life. And he's taught Greek, the ancient international language of diplomacy. He grows up part of the establishment, a member of a learned Jewish elite. His first taste of travel is to Jerusalem. He goes there as part of his education. And this is where he first encounters the followers of Jesus, a young revolutionary teacher whose popular support makes him a major threat to the authorities. To Saul, Jesus is the enemy.
In fact, he was so zealous that he was involved in persecuting this new cult of people who are following Jesus as the Messiah.
There's no evidence that Saul ever met Jesus, but we know he considered his teachings blasphemous. And after the crucifixion, he devoted his life to wiping out his followers.
This was basically a nascent group that was forming in cities throughout Palestine, and Paul thought if he could kill and deprive these communities of their leadership, perhaps he could snuff out this new religion.
It is this background, conservative, traditional, violently anti-Christian, that makes the story of Paul's conversion all the more remarkable. The New Testament says that he pursued a group of Jesus' followers who had fled to the city of Damascus. On the road, he was struck down by a blinding light. It said that Jesus appeared to him in a vision, and Saul repented, transforming himself from that moment on into a messenger of the gospel.
Well, certainly his dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus was the beginning of his own spiritual journey. Here, the persecutor now becomes the ardent follower of Jesus as the risen Lord.
He continues on to Damascus, where he is baptized, taking the name of Paul, and his mission begins. Paul begins a journey that will last the rest of his life and cover an estimated 20,000 miles. It is made easier by the enormous network of Roman roads.
We're walking along a section of Roman road about 10 miles north of Tarsus. This gives us a good idea of what Paul experienced as he traveled along these roads throughout the eastern Mediterranean region.
These were being constructed by the Roman military to make long-distance travel as fast as possible. Without them, the government of their vast and growing empire would have been impossible.
The remarkable preservation of a Roman road like this shows how well they were made. We're looking here at the original stone pavement called the metalling that was on the surface of the road, as well as the original curbing.
Roman roads are built to a strict formula. First, a trench is dug, then packed with boulders and sand to make a solid base. This is topped with layers of smaller stone and clay, and then paving stones, often made of basalt, are laid on top. They're sloped so that rainwater runs into the guttering at the sides. Paul starts his mission in Antioch, the provincial capital of Syria. His followers there are the first people to be called Christians. And he then keeps moving through all the big cities of the region, seeking the places where the old religions are most powerful. He will preach his message in the shadow of the Temple of Artemis. It is one of the wonders of the ancient world and the biggest pagan temple on the planet. In 52 AD, St. Paul comes to Ephesus, the fourth largest city in the ancient world. He is just one of tens of thousands of pilgrims visiting the city. Most have come to venerate the goddess Artemis.
Artemis was the goddess of the hunt. She was also the protectress of virgins. And we know that during the yearly festivals, this was a time when the young unmarried women would find their spouses.
Artemis was one of the most important gods in Greek and Roman religion. And here she had a shrine to match her status. The Temple of Artemis was known far and wide. Its image was molded on the coins that circulated the region. This was one of the 7 wonders of the world, and in Paul's time, the largest temple in existence. As a magnet for pagan pilgrims, it played a key role in Paul's plan.
Ephesus became a wonderful base for him because the Temple of Artemis was here, and he used it for his own benefit because the many people who came into the city to participate in the various festivities were an audience for him to preach the gospel to.
Our investigators will reconstruct the Temple of Artemis as Paul would have seen it. The evidence suggests that the people of Ephesus used revolutionary construction techniques. But all that remains today are a few marble blocks recovered from beneath 20 feet of silt.
To build this temple required a monumental task. Not only did they have to build it, they needed to figure out how to build it. They'd never done anything like this before.
In their desire to honor their goddess, the temple's builders and engineers set themselves a challenging task. The decision was made to build the temple entirely from marble, and the nearest source of marble lay 8 miles away. It all had to be transported back to the construction site. Archaeologist Julian Bennett is seeking to discover how it was done.
Gangs of men would be working with metal chisels and hammers all the way around to create a narrow trough less than 6 inches wide. You can still see the surviving trough there. And then once they got the channel down to the level of the block they wanted, you came from the side, you hit it with steel wedges, and the block would lift off.
An estimated 51,000 tons of marble were needed. The Ephesians didn't do the hard work themselves. They delegated it to slaves and criminals.
A common punishment for crime was to be sentenced to work in the quarries. You weren't expected to live too long, and you probably didn't.
Once they'd carved out the blocks, they still had to get them to the temple construction site. In the 21st century, quarrymen rely on heavy machinery. A few hundred yards from the ancient quarry, gray marble is still being extracted from the same site. The average block is 13 tons, about the same size as the blocks used to build the Temple of Artemis.
Today, a machine makes it look easy. When the temple was built, sheer manpower.
But the temple architects used all their ingenuity to speed up the process. They invented a method that would make them better stone movers than even the Egyptians. They turned the square blocks into wheels. Wooden cradles were built around the cut rock so that it could easily be rolled the 8 miles into town. Once they had the raw materials, they could set about building one of the greatest temples the world has ever seen. In its heyday, it would attract more pilgrims than the Temple of the Jews in Jerusalem. Today, the site where it once stood is a flooded marsh. It's hard to imagine why such a huge temple would be constructed here, on a piece of land no modern builder would touch. The Roman historian Pliny claims the marshy ground was chosen as a precaution against frequent earthquakes. It would cushion the tremors. Another theory is that a meteor landed here. The ancients thought it was a god sent from heaven and constructed their temple around it. Either way, the location presented the builders with a serious problem: how to construct what would be one of the wonders of the world in a swamp. They started by creating a dry base, treading down a layer of charcoal, then covering it with sheep fleece to prevent water rising up. Slate blocks were put on top. The floor of slate and marble was built 8 feet high to stay above the water level. It spanned an area 255 feet wide and 425 feet long. This sturdy platform supported a forest of columns. This one is 45 feet high, but Pliny reveals that the originals were a massive 60 feet, 6 stories tall. To achieve this ambitious engineering task, the architects used scaffolding. They assembled the columns from a series of stacked drums, each weighing more than 8 tons. A column consisted of around 30 drums, and once assembled, they were fluted with hammer and chisel. This was done an incredible 127 times. Amongst the ruins, Aaron Marshall finds evidence of how they built the temple roof.
So, having gotten the columns up, now you have the task of actually erecting the lintels. The lintels are all of those stone blocks which you have to put on top of the columns.
Again, it's Pliny who tells us how the lintels were positioned. It was crucial to get it precisely right.
What they did was they erected a ramp of reed bags all the way up to the level of the top of the columns. Then they placed the lintels on top of them and then poked a hole in the reed bag so all the sand came out. Slowly enough so that the lintels could be adjusted. You have to bear in mind, these aren't mortared. They have to be exact.
It took 120 years to complete the temple. We can now bring to life this incredible part of St. Paul's lost world, an astonishing building that was bigger than anything that had gone before. It was the focal point of huge activity, all centered around the cult of the goddess. An awning in the roof bathed her statue in light. And the cult of Artemis was by no means the city's only religion. The Romans believed in many gods, and they tolerated the traditional beliefs of the peoples they conquered. So at first, Paul and his new religion are well received. And a few miles from the temple in the city center, Paul discovered something that will allow him to deliver his message to an audience of unprecedented size.
We're entering one of the most spectacular buildings in Ephesus. 25,000 people came here for games and for protest. St. Paul entered here.
The city's theater, also built from white marble, was undergoing expansion while Paul was in the city. 459 feet across, containing 66 rows of seats, it was once the largest theater in the country.
Paul would have come here and addressed one of the biggest audiences of his life. This was the perfect theater. It seated 25,000 people, and the acoustics allowed for a dramatic impact.
The superb acoustics derive from the design of the theater's seating.
These seats are wider, and the further up you go, they're narrower. And this concave shape helps to retain the sound in the theater.
But the theater wasn't designed simply for speeches and plays. The partition that shields the front row indicates that Paul shared his stage with more dangerous entertainment.
The wall is high to protect the spectators from the death, from the blood and the guts of what went on here.
The recent discovery of a dedicated graveyard in Ephesus confirms that this theater was an arena where gladiators fought. These immensely popular contests drew large audiences. And as far as Paul was concerned, the gladiator games attracted even more people to hear his message. Because what separated St. Paul from Jesus' other disciples is that he doesn't just target Jews, he aims to convert people of all faiths. His methods would cause Christianity to become a worldwide religion. Ultimately, they would bring about the downfall of the Roman Empire. And yet it was the Romans' own engineering skill which gave St. Paul the opportunity he needed. St. Paul lived and preached in the city of Ephesus, part of modern-day Turkey, for 2.5 years. The largest city in Roman Asia, with an open-minded and cosmopolitan population, it was the ideal place to seek new converts. Archaeologist Julian Bennett discovered that the way the Romans built their towns gave Paul a unique chance to bring huge numbers of people to Christianity. But he also finds that this city had its eye fixed on more worldly pursuits than theology and a new religion.
Well, every Roman city would have had a brothel. This was an everyday fact of Roman life.
Paul is in a city with a reputation for pleasure-seeking.
A male-dominated society when a young man would not marry until he was in his mid-20s or 30s. A place like Ephesus, a harbour city, would have had several brothels.
Right in the center of town, early archaeologists found an intriguing signpost. It featured a foot and a heart.
This particular building, when they excavated it in the 19th century, they found a number of oil lamps here with scenes of erotic art on them, and also an inscription referring to young people. And so the excavators came to the natural conclusion this was the main brothel of Ephesus. It occupies such a prominent corner.
Prostitution was an important source of income for the Roman administration.
We even know that the prostitutes paid a tax to the city and to the government, and that this tax was the equivalent of one sexual act, and they had to pay this tax every month.
But it wasn't just about pleasure. The fundamental challenge for the town administrators was providing vital amenities for over 200,000 people. The most important was running water. The city's source was 8 miles away in the Marnus Valley. Diverting it into Ephesus required an extraordinary feat of engineering.
Well, here we have it. This is the aqueduct bridge for Roman Ephesus. This was built something like 2,000 years ago, before the time of St. Paul's visit here, but it's still in incredibly good condition.
An aqueduct this size needed funding beyond what the city could pay for, but it gave politicians a chance to gain favor with the masses.
It gives us the name of the man, Gaius Sextilius Pollio, with his wife and also their son, for the people of Ephesus. Sua pecunia facundum curavit. We pay for this from our own pockets. It's a way of making certain the people of Ephesus remember who you are. Or perhaps more to the point, when election time comes round again, remember my stepson.
Whatever their motive, the private individuals who paid for projects like this did a great service for the city. Pollio's aqueduct carried vital water supplies into Ephesus, where they entered an elaborate cistern.
This is precisely the sort of thing we're looking for when following an aqueduct. And they're absolutely jam-packed with calcium carbonate. It's calcium that's been dissolved out of the water, coming down with the aqueduct through these limestone hills, come into the city somewhere in this area, onto this structure. And over here, a section which has been broken loose. If I can lift this, you have the flange at the one end, the socket at the other end. The flange would always be on the downstream side. So, a very good example of Roman technology.
Pipes like these ran in a network down the hill. There were 100 gallons a day for each Ephesian, comparable to the provision made in most modern cities. Paul and most other citizens got their water from communal fountains, but some buildings were supplied directly. One was the bathhouse. The Roman baths were the focal point of the city's social life. Here the Ephesians discussed politics, philosophy, and Paul's religious ideas. Christianity spread by word of mouth, and it was from places like this that Paul's message began to pass to a wider audience. The bathhouses were places equipped with what was then high technology, including an underfloor heating system called a hypocaust.
And we are, in fact, very lucky at this particular point. This is a very good preserved cross-section of a typical hypocaust system. So you can see the pillars here which support the main floor, a very thick, very hard pink Roman plaster known as opus signinum. It retains heat. On top of this, we're very lucky, marble slabs from the floor.
Hot air flooded the underfloor space, spreading up the walls to heat the room from all sides. Hot water was piped into the bath. The dirty water from the bathhouse was put to good use. It flushed out waste from other buildings. And just next door is one of the most important facilities found in any large Roman city.
And sure enough, a really nice Roman public latrine. Marble seats, nice and cool in the summer, not so nice perhaps in the winter. And you'd sit here next to your neighbour, talk about the weather, gladiatorial games, what life was like. You have a nice little water trough in front because the Romans did not have toilet paper. Instead, every Roman carried a personal sponge, and they would have the sponge on the end of a stick, dip it in the end of the water, and now you see what this is for.
Our evidence for this comes from an unusual source.
We are told that one gladiator, rather than go out and fight his opponent, decided to commit suicide. And he did so by making the excuse of going to the latrine and grabbing hold of a sponge and choking himself to death with this. So that's how we know about the sponges.
While Paul would have used these public restrooms, the upper classes had the privacy of their luxury homes. Today, the remains of these lavish houses are protected in a climate-controlled shelter. St. Paul would have seen them being built and furnished in exotic marble brought from across the Roman Empire to advertise their owners' wealth. Each house had a private bathroom, constantly flushed by the continuous flow of the aqueduct system.
This is a very high quality latrine, small private latrine. We know in Rome at least, we assume in Ephesus as well, they had different sized water pipes and they calculated the tax you paid by the size of your water pipe. So to have a private toilet like this is very much a sign of status.
The wealthiest households could even afford an early form of air conditioning, walls of water.
You needed water every day just to stay alive. You need water for washing, for cooking, but it helps to cool down the air as well. So all in all, this must have been an extremely pleasant place to be in, especially in the middle of the summer.
The Ephesian ruling classes enjoyed high quality of life, and suddenly Paul threatened to disrupt that. Not only did he undermine their pagan beliefs, but with it, he damaged the city's most important trade. Religion was big business in this Ephesus. Its market fed off pilgrims to the temple. Silver statuettes of the goddess Artemis sold as charms brought in vast revenue. But the arrival of Christianity meant that people were turning their backs on Ephesus. 25,000 people gathered in the great theater to hear a silversmith called Demetrius speak. He told them that Paul was not only insulting their goddess, but also threatening their main source of income. He stirred the crowd to the point where an anti-Christian riot erupted. Tradition has it that to appease the angry mob, Paul was thrown into prison. It's thought that was where he would write some of the letters that would make up so much of the New Testament. On his release, he was told to leave Ephesus. But his new religion had already taken hold. The city was becoming a city of Christians. And the silversmith Demetrius was right. The city of Ephesus declined with the cult of Artemis. It was the beginning of a long, slow collapse that will see the temple fall into ruin. Paul moved on. his message would have an equally powerful effect elsewhere. It would reach to the very furthest parts of the Roman Empire, transforming every community it touched. Next, we investigate the religious society that sprung up in the wake of St. Paul. In the strange land of Cappadocia, a mysterious group of Christians would seek safety by building a secret world underground. 15 million years ago, a series of volcanic eruptions around the Mediterranean threw up immense clouds of ash, blanketing the land layer upon layer. Over time, this created a bizarre, otherworldly place. Today, it's called Cappadocia. Some scholars believe that St. Paul came here to preach his new religion. Our investigators are trying to understand the part that this alien landscape played in the birth of Christianity. And the best way to see what traces remain is from above. It stretches over 15,000 square miles. It's dotted with sculpted cones, pyramids, and obelisks. The ash is up to 300 feet thick. Each layer is of a different consistency, and this means that erosion by wind and rain has created a remarkable, uneven terrain. Early explorers thought the shapes must have been carved by some ancient race. The buildings do show the skill and craftsmanship of a highly sophisticated people. Their works can still be seen, and it still impresses.
We see some steps there cutting into the rock, leading up to somebody's habitation. It's an incredibly gorgeous place, beautiful.
The word Cappadocia derives from the Persian for land of beautiful horses. The Cappadocians were famed as suppliers of prize animals for the Roman army. Down on the ground, Veronica Callas chooses the best form of local transport and heads for the Ilara Valley, a canyon cut deep into the ash. She finds an extraordinary concentration of ancient churches carved into the rock face. There are over 100 of them in this 10-mile valley alone. It's clear that Paul's message had an immense impact. The churches are decorated with frescoes that depict stories from the New Testament. Veronica wants to trace Paul's story back further. She heads for a settlement a few miles north of the canyon to try to discover how early Cappadocians lived. What Paul would have come across was an extraordinary community of cave dwellers. This settlement has long since been abandoned, but its ancient inhabitants left behind tantalizing glimpses of their lives.
It's a large square room, and it has a conical vault that leads up into a ventilation shaft.
There's a chimney. They lit fires here.
This is most likely where they cooked. This is an oven with fire burning down below and perhaps a grill.
To the trained eye, another room reveals evidence of industry.
This is known as a pit loom, and this is a fine example where you might have a wooden frame erected around the sitter's lap in order to weave textiles.
There are also pits for storing clay jugs or amphoras. Using these clues, sculpted 2,000 years ago from ash, Veronica is building up a picture of what the Cappadocians were like.
The people who lived here were said to be very rugged, the cowboys of the empire. And there's a story that when a viper would bite a Cappadocian, the viper would die. This is how tough the Cappadocians were.
And yet, living on the trade route between Europe and Asia, these people were becoming rich. The Cappadocians' lifestyle was sophisticated and comfortable. A large ceremonial hall indicates the high status of the people living here. Most of the ancient world's freestanding buildings have long since crumbled away. But Cappadocia's volcanic ash retains a record of its architecture. It offers a unique glimpse of the lost world in which St. Paul operated, and there is clear evidence that his religion gained a foothold here.
This is a really nice church. It's in a basilica style with columns and piers and arcades separating this very large barrel-vaulted nave from side aisles, and here we're entering into the sanctuary where the altar should be.
Although these columns appear to have been built from bricks and mortar, they are actually cut from the volcanic ash. Their elaborate style simply mimics the building techniques of the time. Ash is easily worked with simple tools, but hollowing out a sophisticated home like this would have taken many months and a great deal of skill and planning. Veronica has analyzed each of the 15 rooms here, and now, using computer graphics, we can reveal the complex structure of this settlement. This residence is the largest and most elaborate in Cappadocia, covering 3,000 square yards, about half the size of a football field. The kitchen, ceremonial halls, and church mark it out as an estate for the elite. It was home to a large, aristocratic, and publicly Christian family. This place is part of St. Paul's legacy. The architectural details of the Church of Dermish Kadir have been remarkably well preserved. They give us a rare insight into how early Christians worshipped.
This is a nice representation of the kind of church that emerged immediately after St. Paul's times. There are no paintings here, and yet the architecture is very, very elegant. You can imagine what an amazing place this would have been around the 4th to the 6th century. This is known as an ambo. That is a pulpit. This is a very important feature in early Christian churches. So this is the closest thing we have to the time of St. Paul. They mostly stood then. It seems that people prayed with their hands open and their chest up to the sky, not bowing down and closed.
The congregation stood around the ambo in the nave, facing the altar in the central apse. To left and right were side aisles containing a baptismal font. Behind them was the church entrance, the narthex. Today, it is lined with empty tombs. But it was not always easy for the Cappadocians to hold on to their Christian faith. The more the early church grew, the more Rome saw it as a threat. So it went literally underground. Next, we reveal the extraordinary subterranean world created by the Cappadocians to provide shelter and safety for tens of thousands of people. For 30 years, Paul traveled the Roman world, spreading the message of Christianity. His journey entered its final phase in Jerusalem. Around 60 AD, he was arrested for a breach of Jewish law. He faced death, but exercised his right as a Roman citizen to go to trial in Rome itself. This was a dangerous gamble. The Roman Emperor Nero saw Christians as a threat.
By the mid-60s, the situation of the Christians in Rome was quite precarious. The Romans recognized that they were not a sect of Judaism, but were a separate religion.
And when fire engulfed the city, destroying hundreds of buildings, Nero needed someone to blame.
After the fire in Rome in 64, Nero was looking for a convenient scapegoat, and he pointed to the Christians as the cause of the fire, and this brought great persecution.
Paul was well known as a Christian leader. Tradition says that Nero singled him out. He had him beheaded. But he couldn't kill Paul's message. In the lands where he had preached, the Christian faith had taken root, and slowly, over centuries, Christianity came to rule the Roman Empire. In 313 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian. The pagan gods were swept aside, their temples destroyed, replaced with the first Christian churches. And yet that golden age is short-lived. It meant the fate of the empire and the church became linked. Christianity grew while Rome remained strong, and when Rome declined, her enemies became the church's enemies. This shift in fortunes was felt even by the remote cave-dwelling Christians of Cappadocia. By the 5th century AD, as Rome fell, they found themselves at the mercy of Arab warlords. They had no means to fight back. They took an incredible course of action. In their tens of thousands, Cappadocia's Christians went underground. It wasn't until the 1960s that this extraordinary story was revealed. The chance find of a secret passageway led to a series of bizarre discoveries. Beneath this landscape are hundreds of miles of man-made tunnels. Their entrances are incredibly well hidden. But opening these cunningly concealed doorways gives us a new insight into the story of the first Christians. Investigations have revealed that the tunnels formed self-contained settlements with all the features of a sophisticated society. People survived down here thanks to ingenious ventilation shafts carved into the rock.
It's quite amazing. If you stand here, you feel a breeze, and we are several meters underneath ground level. In fact, they reach the water table, so these function both as ventilation shafts and as wells to pump water from down below. We have a large square, what looks like a room, but in fact it's a bin for grapes, and the grapes would be pressed. And so wine, the liquid from pressing, would come through here and then be deposited in this rock-cut space here.
Life underground cannot have been easy. It's hard to imagine how these people survived without seeing the sun.
They didn't have a sense of day and night down there, and I think that must have created some very strange psychology in people.
They were clearly desperate. They secured the entrances to these complexes with heavy wheel-like doors. Some remain sealed to this day. And 2 stories down, there's hard proof of what drove them here.
This is what looks like an altar. We don't really know why this is here in the middle. The altar usually is in the apse. 2 apses side by side. That's how we know that it's a church.
They'd been forced underground because of their faith. It was natural that they would build altars to worship. 40 settlements like this have been discovered. The largest is 8 stories deep, sinking 90 yards underground with 20 miles of tunnels. It's believed that up to 20,000 people could hide in this one complex alone. And it's believed that there are many more such networks still to be found. It would be another 5 centuries before peace returned to this region. For 300 years, Christians used these tunnels and endured enormous hardship to preserve their faith. That faith was St. Paul's legacy.
Paul's role in early Christianity has been said by some to be really the founder of Christianity, but really the message he proclaimed was that of Jesus himself. He wrote half of the New Testament. 13 books are attributed to Paul. He established churches all the way from Antioch to Rome, and these became the foundation for later Christianity.
St. Paul spent a lifetime traveling through the cities of the ancient world. He challenged the might of the Roman Empire. When he began, Christianity was a faith in danger of extinction. But through the efforts of this one man, it not only survived but flourished to become one of the world's major religions.